Hello, I'm talking to you today about the Cookie Clearinghouse at Stanford's Center for Internet and Society. And we started this a month ago on June 19th, a month ago from the time I'm speaking today, and started this project within Stanford's Law School at the Center for Internet and Society, where I'm the Director of Privacy, and I'm also the Director of the Cookie Clearinghouse. My name is Aleecia McDonald. And as mentioned, since this is only a month old, a lot of the decisions I'm talking about today actually are very much in progress. So I'll be giving you some sense of the framework of where we think we're going, but please understand that this is very much subject to change, and you can find out the latest at our website at cch.law.stanford.edu. So let me give a quick introduction to how things work online. If you're technically savvy, you might skip forward by 2 slides. So first of all, if you visit a website, here for example at law.stanford.edu, this website looks like one thing, but it actually has pieces for many different computers. Not all of them are at Stanford. So for example, there are a number of pieces here. You can see the last icon is from Flickr. That's photographs of people from the law school. We also have a calendar widget and a search widget. Those may also be from different companies. And finally, there are things that you can't see that are involved in making up a website as well. And some of these are known as third-party trackers, and they can have a 1 pixel by 1 pixel white GIF that's on the website or otherwise invisible. So you don't know they're there, but they know you're there. And so that's part of what's going on when you look at a website. It looks like one piece from stanford.edu, but it's actually made of many different pieces from lots of places. So there's another part that matters for what we're doing, which is a notion that the web forgets. To put that more technically, HTTP is stateless. Let me give you an example of what that means. If you go and you're shopping online and you visit a store and you put a pair of pants into your shopping cart and then you go someplace else to buy a shirt on the same website, the website by itself doesn't remember that you put pants in the shopping cart. It just forgets all about that. It only has the page that you're on, not the pages you'd been on before. So to fix that problem, engineers introduced something called a cookie, which is just a small file. It sits on your hard drive, and it has a unique identifier for you, or can hold that, so that every time the website sees you, it says, oh, you again. Yes, okay, you're the one with the pants that you have in your shopping cart, and the website can keep that information in a database that they hold on the back end. So most people haven't looked at cookies on their hard drive before. Here's an example. You can see this content here, 74D31FE. It doesn't really matter what that says. The point is that it's a randomly generated unique identifier that now every time your computer visits the same website, it says, oh, okay, you again. So this can be really helpful. This also can be something that has some real privacy implications. And so we wind up with websites today. The most popular websites may have over 100 other sites, other companies you haven't heard of before, that are then tracking you across from website to website. So they might be able to see that you were on the Stanford website, and then on the New York Times, and then CNN, and start to build up a profile of your interests and where you've been, and sort of your intellectual history online. So some people like this very much. They like the customized features that they can get from this, and they get news stories that are recommended to them and products that are recommended to them and tailored. And some people are extremely concerned about the privacy issues around this, and different people have different preferences. So there have been calls from a variety of people for better tools for users to be able to manage their privacy online, especially since a lot of this is literally invisible. So some of those calls have come from the Federal Trade Commission in the United States. They're very concerned about fairness and protecting consumers, and some have come from some of the regulators in Europe, the Article 29 Working Party, and some others, as they work through issues of how to deal with privacy online. And so this is where the Cookie Clearinghouse fits into the bigger picture. We're providing tools for other people to create tools for privacy. So we're sort of one step removed. And what we do is we publish 2 lists. One list is a block list. Please block cookies from the site. And the other list is an allow list. Please allow cookies from this site. And so these lists will be available to everybody for use free any way they want to use them. And you could imagine browsers using them in different ways. So one web browser might change how all of their users' experience works with cookies online unless those users make an affirmative choice to do something else and use a different option. And another browser might use this, but only for people who've picked a very specific way of managing their cookies already. But on top of the web browsers, there are also add-ins and plugins and add-ons and plugins and other things that go into web browsers that can be integrated to change the way web browsers work. And there are other tools like antivirus packages that delete tracking cookies. So these are all parts of an ecosystem that could use the information that we're publishing and might, in fact, use it in very different ways. So to give you just a little preview, there are three important parts of the Cookie Clearinghouse. One is an initial set of presumptions, and then 2 and 3, a challenge and counter-challenge process. And I'll talk through how all of that works. So let's start with the presumptions. These first two presumptions are how some browsers work today. The notion is that if a user visits a site, set the cookies from that site. But if a user hasn't visited a site, don't set the cookies from the site. So this tries to come up with a balance between functionality for first-party sites and privacy from third-party sites that users maybe don't even know are there. So this is how things work today in some browsers. We're adding 2 new things. The third piece here is around DAA opt-out cookies. Now, an opt-out cookie from the Digital Advertising Alliance, the DAA, you can set an opt-out cookie saying, please don't show me targeted ads, behaviorally targeted ads based on things that I viewed online. Those companies can still collect data about you, use the data, buy, sell, but they don't show you targeted ads anymore. So if your concern is about seeing targeted ads, this addresses your concern. If your concern is broader around privacy, it only gets you partway there, but it's still something that exists today. So the DAA opt-out cookies don't work under browsers that do those first 2 presumptions. Here's why. If you go to the DAA Ad Choices site and you say, okay, I'd like to opt out from, say, 50 of their 100-member companies, if you haven't visited all 50 of those sites, you now can't set the cookies because they're cookies from a site you haven't visited. So you go to give your preferences around opt-out and the whole thing just doesn't work for you. So what we're saying is, okay, we don't want to get in the way of user choice. We're going to have a list of those opt-out cookies. So if you try to set one, we just say, this is special, and we will set that for you. So the other piece on this is around user consent. And user consent is, again, as mentioned, some users very much want to have the benefits of being tracked, and they want to be able to manage that a little bit more fine-grained, right? Rather than saying, set all cookies at all times, they want to be asked and be able to say, yes, I agree. From this company, from this site, yes, I'm okay with having information that persists about me. I don't want the web to forget me in this case. The other piece is this allows companies to have a dialogue with users who visit their sites, to be able to say, hi, I see that you're blocking cookies, but in order for us to keep our business afloat, we show ads that collect the following information, and here are our business partners, and here's what they do with that information. If you're comfortable, please click yes to continue, or perhaps offer a choice of, or spend $5 to join the site, or perhaps just say, this is the deal. This is what we do. Accept it or not. But what that does by starting a dialogue is it makes the invisible parts of this ecosystem apparent to users, so they understand what it is that they're doing. Studies that I've done show that users like the deal of ads for free content. They're used to that. It's 100 years we've been doing that, maybe more, right, in different media. Where users start to be concerned is the idea that it's ads plus data about them and data that they don't understand in exchange for free content. So that's what this starts to have a dialogue about, so that people can understand what's going on and be able to agree or not. So I want to point out one thing about this. With the exception of the list of the cookies from the DAA, there's no need to have a list for any of these aspects. And so sites a user visits, you know that based on what's in the URL bar. You don't need a list there. You don't need a list of sites a user hasn't visited. User consent, we can change how the cookies work a little bit. We're working on the technical details of that. So we're not trying to come up with accept and block lists for everything on the internet. That would be quite an undertaking. That wouldn't work. But not to worry, we don't have to. So once we have these 4 presumptions, this is how the world would work built in tools from browsers and add-ons if the Cookie Clearinghouse didn't publish anything. We then have an opportunity for a challenge and a counter-challenge. And a challenge is somebody stepping forward to say, this presumption doesn't work for a particular reason. So let me give a couple of examples as I walk through this. So let's say that you visit a site. Let's say that you visit the NewYorkTimes.com. And there is a widget that Stanford has created. Stanford's created a widget so that you can see where different people from Stanford are with photos and maps and things like this. Little widget on the New York Times. If you've never gone to Stanford, Stanford can't set or get any information about you because you're visiting the New York Times. Now, if you go to the Stanford website, Stanford can set and read cookies, and then you go back to the New York Times, and because you've seen them as a first party before, now they can set and read cookies from you, even though they're in a third-party context on the New York Times. So what this means is that the information that companies get depends on the order that you visit websites. This doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's really hard to explain to people. So what we're trying to do is say, okay, there's a difference between a first-party and a third-party context, and give people the opportunity to say, I'm being tracked all across the web because I visited this one company once, and I only want them to know about me when I'm on their site. So as an example in another direction, let's say that Stanford has a bunch of different servers. So this would be around the second presumption. And Stanford has stanford.edu, and then they also have images-stanford.edu. As far as the internet is concerned, these are completely different, right? So that would mean that images-stanford.edu cannot set cookies when images are loaded on stanford.edu, even though, as far as Stanford's concerned, this is all one group. So the challenge here would be for a company to say, no, really, these servers, they're all the same thing. They should all be treated the same way. They should all be treated as first parties together, and have an opportunity for that to happen as well. Now, for the third one, this is one I don't think we'll see happen, but you could imagine somebody saying, I set a DIA opt-out cookie, and now they're using that cookie to track me across the web. So that would be an example of a challenge. I don't know of any companies doing that today, but that is a thing that could happen. And then finally, around user consent, somebody could say, I didn't actually consent to this. And so that would be a challenge there. So this, for the first time, is we have accept lists and block lists. And the accept list is, ordinarily under the presumptions, a cookie would not be set, but override that and set the cookies now because they're on the accept list. And the block list is the opposite. Ordinarily, the cookies would be set under the presumptions, but override that and block the cookies because the challenge succeeded here. So the opposite, of course, is a counter challenge. Somebody comes in and says, no, the challenge was wrong. And so for that, we could just remove from the list, we get back to the original presumptions, and we do a technical review to determine, is the challenge correct, is the counter challenge correct, and work through those issues. So there's a fifth possibility that could be coming called Do Not Track. And Do Not Track is a standard from the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, started by Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who is the inventor of HTML. And so Do Not Track is a notion of trying to balance some business needs and some privacy interests. So for example, there might be something called a permitted use, where a company can collect and use data in very specific ways to support their business, but that are also more privacy preserving. This starts to get into policy far more. The Cookie Clearinghouse is fairly well scoped around technology. But the Do Not Track standard would allow a whole bunch of different policy discussions to happen as well. So far, it has not been published at the time I'm speaking today. The hope is that there will be a Do Not Track standard such that we can then use it within the Cookie Clearinghouse and say, if a company responds back to a user and says, yes, I am honoring your Do Not Track signal, I see that you've asked for more privacy, and this is what I'm going to do, we could then set their cookies. But until we have something published, there's There's nothing that we have to work with yet. We're just hopeful that Do Not Track will address some of these policy issues. So I want to just give a little bit more detail about how challenges and counter-challenges work, and then wrap up. So for challenges, the idea is that at a structural level, you have a web form and a couple of different options of why doesn't the base presumption work, and you check the box and indicate what the issue is and provide some information about that. So if you're familiar with the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, this is a similar thing, but it's around intellectual property. It's around having a photograph that you took that somebody else has on their website, and you say, wait, no, that's actually mine. So different effects, but the infrastructure, the design, is actually a little bit similar. And so let me show what some of that looks like. Here's how Google handles Digital Millennium Copyright Act takedown request. So they have a bunch of checkboxes here, and to just zoom in a little bit on one of these, this says, I have found content that may violate my copyright. And then also checking, yes, I am the copyright owner, or I'm authorized to act on his or her behalf. So those are the sorts of things that you would attest in a web form when telling Google, hey, there's a problem. Twitter does something similar. And here there's a checkbox of I have a good faith belief that the information I'm providing is correct, and also that I am electronically signing this notice by typing my name in the box below. So that's how these sorts of web forms have been developed. And then to look at the counter-challenge side, this is from a group called Chilling Effects, and again with checkboxes and particular categories. This one is each of these works were removed in error. So for Chilling Effects with the counter notice, it's, okay, I'm the copyright owner. That was my photo on my site, and it just got, challenged. No, the challenge is incorrect. It really is my photo. So it's a similar situation to that we're doing with Cookie Clearinghouse, only we're doing this about cookies rather than about content that is online. So there are two phases to this work. Phase one, we've just begun. That is to come up with objective, predictable criteria so people can understand how cookies wind up on a block list or an accept list. And so we're looking at filling in what do those boxes look like on the web form? What is it that people need to check to say? And what are the criteria for something that will be treated differently from those 4 basic presumptions? Of those, the one that will take the most time will be consent. Now, there's a lot of work that has already gone into consent in the past. The Federal Trade Commission has a staff report where they outline what they think consent would look like. The European side also has quite a lot of discussion, and there's a notion of implied consent and explicit consent and informed consent and about 6 different adjectives around the word consent. And so there's some publications there as well from the Article 29 Working Party. And there are also some examples of corporations that have worked with various regulatory bodies and have had those regulatory bodies say, yep, we think this is what we had in mind. This is pretty good. This is a good way to do it. There's also some examples that are counterexamples where there are publications from regulatory bodies saying this is not good enough. This doesn't give enough information, or it's not clear enough. So one of the pieces that we'll be doing is wading through all of these different documents and seeing if we can find something that fits nicely in with all of them. We're not looking to be overly prescriptive and tell people, you must use green in 14-point font. That's not the sort of detail we want to get into, but just what does it look like to have users actually making a choice, and what must that be? So the other piece we're going to need to work on is the file formats. This becomes more technical. We want to make sure that browsers are able to use this. It scales, it moves quickly. Speed matters for browsers. And also we need to create the infrastructure for the forms and make sure that we avoid as much as possible some of the foreseeable problems. Like you could imagine one competitor trying to file information about another competitor, not because it's true, but just to be anti-competitive. You could imagine people trying to just spam the system with lots of automated requests. These are problems other groups have faced. One particularly good example there, based out of Harvard, is a group called Stop Badware. They've been involved in keeping users safe from malware, and so they also have the same sort of structure where people can write in with information. So we'll look at what other groups have done and how they've solved this, and try to, from the onset, learn from things that have happened in the past. So the second phase, once we have this all set up, right, and it's ready to go, okay, then we start getting the challenges and the counter challenges coming in. And this is then ongoing. And so this ongoing work is a technical evaluation. And as much as possible, this is sitting in a lab and trying to reproduce what we have in front of us. If somebody says one thing and somebody says something else, what is it? Can we reproduce it? In most cases, that should be sufficient. Now, the web is very dynamic. There are times where you simply cannot reproduce something. It doesn't work the same way when you go back as it did at the time of the person who files the challenge or the counter challenge. So for things like this, we may need to actually talk with companies and say, hey, here's what we're hearing. Does this make sense to you? What's going on? We may look at this and say, well, we still can't tell one way or the other what's actually happening. Could you just add a line to your privacy policy about what your practices are so that everything's clear? And that's a piece that might work very well. But wherever possible, we would like to have this be something that's just very technically cut and dried and be able to see what's going on. So last thing is I'd like to invite you, especially since you've taken the time to go through all of this, thank you, to come be involved. You can join us at our website at cch.law.stanford.edu. There'll be a user group. You can join that if you'd like to be from the perspective of a web user, trying to get a sense of how this would or wouldn't help you online. And you can also join from the perspective of a business counsel of how will this affect your company. And joining will give you the opportunity to hear the latest as we go through this and also provide feedback to us. So there's a small advisory board. It's small on purpose. And we're looking also to get as many different voices and feedback and do this in as intelligent a way as possible. So if you have views as to how we can do this better, we would very much like to hear from you. So thank you again for your time in going through this, and please be in touch. Thanks.